The Netflix series First Kill, the modern-day vampire thriller, was based on a story by best-selling author V.E. Schwab. The fantasy writer started her career in 2011 and has been on fire ever since, publishing nearly 24 books with modern characters who are redefining the genre we call fantasy. What is it like walking into a bookstore and going to your section?
I think it will never get old.
When it comes to books, Victoria Schwab has an affinity for both writing and reading.
I mostly just come and I browse like everybody else.
Devouring more than her fair share of titles each year.
And I'll try and pick a book that feels like it's not on my radar. I have a really strong belief that you need to consume story to create story. And it's not about getting ideas. It's about creative cross-pollination. Like, I read 100 books, but among those 100 books are poetry, history, biography, children's. I want to just absorb character. I want to absorb story. It's one of the best ways to hone your sense of, I call it an internal story monster.
Schwab's is thriving, with more than 24 books published, most under the name V.E. Schwab rather than Victoria.
That's like my author persona, and then Victoria is who I am as a human. I just feel like it's a little safer to have a tiny wall that just says, oh, if they're talking about V.E. Schwab, they're not talking about me. They don't know me. They don't know the person that's making the work. They know the creator.
And when it comes to her creative process,
I like to play God. So
Wow, okay.
I like to play God.
You don't mess around.
I like to play God, meaning I like to know as much as I can about everything before I start.
Okay.
Most specifically, I want to know how it ends. To me, the entire purpose of telling a story is the ending. It's like the taste left in your mouth at the end of a meal, right?
So you work your way back.
I work my way backwards.
As for Schwab's own story, she grew up moving between San Jose, California and Nashville, Tennessee, dreaming of Olympic, not literary glory.
I grew up on the soccer field. I grew up in a fencing strip. I was like a major athlete for my entire teens. I never sat still.
Love that.
And it took the right stories for me to realize that I wanted to be a reader.
What do you remember connecting with in a story?
Yeah, I mean, I connected with fantasy. I connected with a very specific kind of fantasy, though. There's the C.S. Lewis style fantasy that says somewhere in your house there is a doorway.
Go through that wardrobe.
Go find it. It keeps one foot in reality at all times. And I was really intoxicated even at 12, 13, 14 by the concept that, oh, I didn't have to only have fantasy when I was reading. I could convince myself that there was fantasy, I just had to look for it.
And then you could help create it.
Exactly. So I was that kid growing up on my hikes looking for keyholes in the stone, looking for tiny cracks in the world. And then as a writer, that's been my greatest goal is not to make you believe in magic, it's simply to make you doubt reality just a little bit.
Which is what she's done since publishing her first novel, The Near Witch, at age 21, drawing readers into the fantasy genre as she sees it.
I always challenge readers to just remember that fantasy is not just wizards and dragons. Fantasy is anything which triggers the imagination to take one step outside of the real. So I think I'm always attracting or trying to attract readers who don't think they like fantasy, and I'm like, let me convert you. Because at the end of the day, I write about characters, I write about people. And the people that the story is happening to, that's what you care about.
The connection is real, from Schwab's villain series to Shades of Magic. Those characters at the heart of her stories, ones often othered in more traditional works.
I write characters that I don't always see in the center place. I got really tired in my early 20s of reading fantasies where only the men were heroes. They felt like the women were cardboard cutouts or stock characters meant to fulfill a role without being people.
Right.
And I simply wanted to see myself at the center of the story.
You talk about like even sexuality.
Yeah, I just think, why be prescriptive? Look, I'm a gay writer who also believes that my characters they can be gay and it doesn't have to be the plot. I came out at 27. I didn't need a coming out story. I needed a queer existence story. I needed to see stories where queer characters got to exist, where their inclusion in the narrative wasn't dependent on their trauma. They got to be heroes and villains and everything in between. They get to be just as complex as their straight counterparts.
In helping redefine the norm of fantasy, Schwab's found both public and critical success. 2020's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue is her best-known work, one that, unlike the rest, was 10 years in the making.
I had this idea before my first novel came out for a girl who made a deal with the devil to live forever and ended up forgotten by everyone she met.
Love it.
And
Love it.
And I kept trying to write it. I got the idea when I was 21, basically. And it's not a book about a 21-year-old. And then I checked in when I was 25. It's not a book about a 25-year-old. And then I turned 30. And Addie LaRue, in so many ways, is a book about 30. It's a book about the arbitrary line of adulthood that society imposes and the fear that comes with it when you realize you're suddenly supposed to know who you are and what you want to do. So it became hitting that point in my own life.
In hearing that, it would have been an entirely different story had you written it 5 years earlier and actually put it down
But this is the thing that's so important to remember for all writers, is that every story you tell would be a different story if you told it at any other point than right now in your life.
How did you end up here? As for her life right now, Schwab's story is still being written.
I studied here.
With no end to work backwards from. 5 years ago, she moved to Scotland, living in a seaside suburb of Edinburgh. It's a place Victoria can call home, from which VE can find inspiration for whatever may be next. Do you worry ever that there won't be a next?
Every day. Yeah. I mean, on some ways, like, I have to make peace with the fact that if I never wrote another book, it doesn't negate the books that I've written. But at the same time, like, this is all I know how to do. And I definitely, in between every single book, have a fear that I will run out of ideas. But if that happens, one, I will try and refill my creative well. But if that doesn't work, I think I've been really fortunate with the ideas that I've had so far. And I don't want to diminish them by saying, if I don't write again, none of this will have been worth it. If I don't write again, all of this will have been worth it.
So full confession, I was not a fan before I heard this was coming up, and I said, yeah, let's do it. Give me a book to read. I heard that plot line of the Addie LaRue book, read it, loved it, I'm in. I have my next one that I'm set to read. She really does create this world that I don't think you have to be a quote-unquote fantasy fan to get into. And next year she's got Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil coming out, already a bestseller with its pre-sales.
Yeah.
I like how she paraphrases C.S. Lewis there and uses those words. Sometimes there's a door in your house or in your life. Go through it.
Go through it.
Yeah.
And
1 foot in reality.
and also there's the concept of expanding the genre.
Yes.
So because I think when people think fantasy, whether it's books, movies, whatever else, they're like,
That's what I did. I completely cut it off.
I love the notion of existence, the be, who you are, and exist.
She's amazing. Amazing
I love
book.
it.